Hey, NSA Carolinas, it's Jason Wojo here, and I am here with an incredibly special guest. You have no idea how excited I am for this interview. The woman I'm going to interview here has been at the chapter in the past as well, and if you've seen her speak either at the chapter or if you had the incredible privilege of being in one of her audiences, you already know how incredible and what a gifted blessing she is to all those who get to who are impacted by her message and what she shares. And I'm speaking of none other than Kelly Swanson. Actually, I don't know, Kelly, are you a native of North Carolina or you just live here?
I live here. I'm originally from Georgia, but I've been in North Carolina since high school. So it's kind of at that point where when do you kind of say you're now from this place? You know what I'm saying?
Well, because you have the Southern accent, and so I didn't know if it was a Carolina thing, but so Georgia. Okay, hey, listen, we're gonna call you like you're close enough to native to Carolina.
Yes, I agree.
So Kelly is someone who has, if there's anyone I know that I'd say has really mastered the art of storytelling as it applies not only to our businesses, and we'll talk about that as well, but personal stories. She has things that she calls her customer story, your signature story. She has a couple different versions, a few different versions of this that we'll let her talk about. But basically, all of these are incredibly important to you as a speaker, to the message you're trying to convey, to the lives that you're going to impact through story, which, by the way, Kelly's going to say this, but story is one of the most incredible ways to impact people because it gets their defenses down, and they can't argue with a story, and it just appeals to them on an emotional level. And so if you've ever seen Kelly tell a story, it's an experience. It's not, Kelly, when you talk, and I've heard your speeches, I feel like I'm there with you. Like you are such an artist in that your ability to kind of,
Thank you.
I don't know how you do it. Like, because I don't know if I've ever seen somebody, quite honestly, that has that same gifting as you. So I want to know, first of all, I know you started as a professional storyteller. Is that true? I'd like to hear of how you got to where you are, and then let's dive into like things as you see how they apply to and where people could benefit from this interview.
Sure. That's a loaded question to ask a speaker, how we got to where we are. But luckily I've answered it enough that I can be pretty concise. I've always been a writer and a storyteller and found refuge in stories and writing down the things I see around me. It was always part of my DNA. And then became a professional storyteller, and that's weird. And no, we don't make much money, and there's a cult following, and there's an art. There's an art to telling a story, and without notes and getting up on a stage. And I fell into the world of the National Storytelling Festival and, that whole world. I went, oh, that's what I want to do. Well, wanting to do it and making a living doing it, as many of us have already realized, are two very different things. So that's where I kind of honed that craft of being able to tell stories. And I'll tell you, when I started, Jason, I wasn't good. I was fast. I was unpolished. It was raw. Then I went through a stage where I was very theatrical. And, with the storyteller, you're not breaking the fourth wall. You're just kind of talking above everybody's heads. I wasn't even there, if you know what I mean. I was in these characters and in these stories. And so, again, very theatrical. And then I met Jeannie Robertson 15 years ago, who said, you are in the wrong place to be doing this. You need to be a speaker. And so she kind of showed me how to convert and leave that world and come into the world of professional speaking. And I'll tell you, I had what you say about me now maybe is part DNA, but is also part of retraining and reprogramming. I was just telling somebody yesterday, another speaker friend, that in the beginning, I was very performance and very canned and very theatrical. And I had to retrain myself and break that fourth wall, as they say in acting, and talk to these people and look at them and figure out how to reach them and not make it all about me, but make it all about them. And how do I take my message and deliver it in a way that they can, that they have an experience. And I was lucky that I had already stumbled on the greatest tool that you have, which is storytelling. But I appreciate all the compliments, but it's interesting. It did take me, I had to teach myself to make this more of a conversation. That's the key, is to make a speech a conversation, not a performance. Long-winded answer, but.
So, and that you actually answered a question though, because I have frequently found myself wondering, like, okay, like how much of this is just like, this is your natural gifting, and like, no matter how hard somebody tries, they're just not going to be good at this? Would you argue that, regardless of who you are, if you put enough work into it, if you learn the foundations and the formulas that you teach, like, is this something that anybody can get good at, would you say? Well, and also maybe not world-class good, but like, I mean, or could they get world-class good at this?
Well, and let's put it in perspective. To answer your question, yes. Anybody can be better at telling the story their way. It's not about doing it a certain way. In fact, being the best storyteller is not what really makes you the most money in this business. It's not even about the best stories. It's about the right stories. It's about the strategic stories you choose and the way you can connect with your audience. It is not about who has the best story. I mean, trust me, my friends have much cooler, more exciting stories, getting blown up and winning medals and, all that. I mean, my story is incredibly mediocre. So if I can do it, anybody can. It's not about having the best story or even crafting it in the best way. So I did want to put that out there. And yes, it can be learned. And what's so freeing is it's about finding the style that works for you, the message that works for you. And actually, it's not about finding exciting stories that are sexy, even though we'll have those. It's about finding the stories that do what you need them to do. That's really, and then making them better or making them more exciting. Now, sure, there is a very small lane of people who their stories and their style and their speeches will be predominantly entertainment oriented. There's the Jeannie Robertsons, I can't think of any others, but she's a great example. Mm-hmm. Those who entertainment really drives everything and the message follows, but it tends to be secondary to the show. It's getting harder and harder for us as speakers to claim that spot and make it, though it still exists. There are still roles where they just predominantly want heavy entertainment with a light message. And in those cases, yeah, the stories that you tell is just kind of depends on the gigs that you want or jobs. Sometimes people don't like me saying gigs like I'm a musician or something, but it also depends on how you're positioning yourself in the market, what kind of business you want to get, who you want to hire you, and why they want to hire you. And I'm a great one to be in this conversation today with you because I straddle the fence between both. One day somebody's calling me because I'm the expert on storytelling. They don't want any stories. They're going to get some, but they don't want the show. They don't want the jokes. They don't want to be motivated. They want to get right to it and change give those people the information they need as fast as possible and the best experience. The next day, somebody else is going to call me. We just opening up our national conference. We want to make them laugh and motivate, a big bang. And the expectation, I promise I'm going to shut up, the expectation that they want when they're booking you for their national keynote to open it up versus going to do a breakout session or a 2-hour workshop is going to be completely different as opposed to a staff event, as opposed to the same company who's not bringing you into a staff event, but they're bringing you into their awards celebration for their salespeople. It all they're moving pieces. Well, you'll quickly learn I answer everything in a long-winded way, but it's important to know. So yes, everybody can become a better storyteller. And I'll end by saying, if you put me in a room and asked me to tell you the story of something that happened to me yesterday and I had not crafted it, it would be awful. And I'm dead serious. I do not know how to do it off the cuff. I have to craft it, put it together. It's like saying, Kelly, make up a song on the spot. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Now, I've gotten better at the smaller little anecdotes and illustrations and things that aren't really stories. I've gotten better in my speaking ability to be able to talk off the cuff. But no, I don't have that skill naturally.
Interesting. Okay. That's really encouraging, I think, for the people that are watching or listening, because I know there are a lot of people probably who don't have that same background or natural skill, and they weren't, 6 years old telling stories and capturing everyone's attention. And so, you said something there that really struck me too, is it's not about the right story. Sorry, it's about the right stories, not about the best story. And by that, do you mean that it's the right story for the message you're trying to convey, or for the right audience, or both? Or what do you mean by that statement?
I mean all of that and more.
Okay.
That it's not just about judging it for its entertainment value or for its shock effect or for its cool factor. It's about judging it for its ability to make your audience think, feel, or act a certain way as a result of hearing the story. And that's the biggest, I'm glad you brought this up. That's the biggest shift, the biggest awareness that needs to happen in us as speakers before we start going to work on our stories and how do we make them better and how we put them together and where do we use them. It's a piece that many people still miss. It's understanding the tool. It's not something you do to add more entertainment in your speech. It is something that allows you to show instead of tell. It is something, can I go into a little tiny bit of the science behind it without getting too deep?
Yeah, that'd be great.
And I'm going to massacre it anyway, so do your own research. Go look up. There are studies at Princeton and Harvard. I have an article in my free gift link that I'll tell you later on the brain and storytelling, but I'll go only so much as I need to really relay to you today. And that is that we all know that two main principles. We all know that people buy, that we're salespeople up on that stage. That's important to note first. You can come deliver the information because the client asked you to. They can say, hey, come give a good customer service speech, and you can come give them 27 ways to be better at customer service that they could have looked up on the internet. And it's probably not going to be very effective because they're not just paying us for the information, they're paying us for the way it's wrapped, for the experience. And we're not just, our goal, I believe, is not just to tell people what to do. Our goal, if we want to make more money and get more spinoff and get more business, is to actually make them want to do it, is to actually motivate and inspire them to take action. And so that makes us salespeople. We're making an argument up here on stage, if you will. We're selling this truth, this awareness, and many messages. And maybe we are selling our book, and maybe we are selling the fact that we can do coaching. Whatever, that makes us standing in the role of not just entertainer and speaker, but as salesperson. And everybody knows in sales that people buy from people they like, trust, believe, and feel like they know. Now, those 4 words, like, trust, believe, know, those are emotional. Those have nothing to do with your PowerPoint slides or how good you look in a suit. They have everything to do with what that person thinks about you. And so as speakers, we need to be thinking, what are we doing in the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes of our speech to allow the audience to like us, to create a trust, to make them feel like they know who we are personally. And so therefore, that means it can't all be about business if we want to open that door. Story shows who you are, because the value of the story is transferred to the teller. When I tell you a story and we're strangers, at the end of that story, you think something about me. You think many things, because whatever I could tell you is never as valuable as what I can show you through a story. So the first thing that it allows us to do is they buy you first, is to become human to your listener. That's what a story allows you to do. The second thing is that we're all there to teach them something. That's obvious. We're hired to teach them something, whether it's 2 points and a song, or whether it's, heavy content. We can all agree that all of us need to teach the audience something. We can also all agree that we learn more, longer, faster. It's retained longer from that which we experience. Trainers out there are nodding. When you get people hands-on, when you do it, when we can experience it, then the learning is magnified and lasts longer. My son remembers history better, not when he hears the facts, but when he travels to the battleground and hears the stories of the people who were there. So if we're going to agree that people are going to learn what they experience more than what they're told, this is where story comes into play. And follow me here, I'm almost through. And I told you I'm going to massacre it, but I'll do my best. When we give people information, bullet points, data, facts, and figures, we're accessing a language processing part of their brain. And in other words, they're not doing anything more than that, other than processing the words. And in fact, words, I hope I don't complicate this more, words I read recently are stored in our brain as images. That for words to have meaning, we actually are attaching images to them in our minds, that we think in images all day long. So if you think of hot, there's an image that relates to that of a time when you experienced hot. And so that if we can wrap data in an image, then it's going to be easier for your audience to understand it, conceptualize it, or whatever the word is, and take it away. Another way of saying that, which these studies have come out at the ones at Princeton and Harvard, have said that when we tell stories, we suddenly activate different parts of people's brains. When you're bringing up a smell, it's lighting up another part. When you're talking about running, it's lighting up another part. When you are describing emotions you have, the audience's brain is searching for a similar narrative or a similar experience that they have. And so magically, as you're telling your story, they are standing in yours, but now they are beginning to stand inside their own. And these studies have proven that with story, we have the ability to actually plant ideas into other people's minds. It shows instead of tells. Simply put, story takes all that content and allows you to deliver it to them in a way they can experience it instead of just hear it. Now, that takes a while to unpack, but it's such an important truth that, once you understand that, then then you're really wanting to use the tool for what it is. And okay, well, what point am I trying to illustrate? What am I going to use this story for? What's the intent? Needs to be the first question you ever ask. Why am I telling this story? Anyway, is that helpful?
That's incredibly valuable. And so what I hear is that a number of things that basically, now does this also mean that you have to be careful when you said that the value of the story is transferred to the teller? Does that mean you also have to be very careful to only tell favorable stories? Like if you tell a bad story, does that negative emotion transfer to you?
I don't know what you mean by bad story. Give me an example of, give me an example.
If you were telling a story about like some awful, tragic, like shooting or mass murder, does that automatically somehow stick to you as a messenger?
No. If let's look at it a different way. It's not really about, okay, let's look at it a different way. When we read books, we identify with the hero of the book. Now, when I say hero, I don't mean it in terms of literature. It's not somebody who saves the day. And a lot of you listening are thinking, wait, I was told not to be the hero of my story. And I don't agree, but I think we need to differentiate between the two meanings of the word. One is the hero who saves the day and does everything right. And aren't you great? No, we don't want that. That is bragging. That is, we don't really care. But being the hero is in being the main character of the story, meaning you're learning something, you're having a pain you went through that was resolved. That's different. And we're fine with hearing that you're the hero of any story, the main character. That's fine. And what you learn and what you experience, we're going to identify with. And so I'm getting tripped up here. In a book, when a character does something we don't like, we suddenly don't agree with them. That's why our main characters in our books tend to do the right thing. Even if they're criminals, there's something in them that's redeeming. Am I making sense? Because we're connecting with you. I'll tell you, I'm not going to like a story where you say, and then I went and robbed a bank and shot a bunch of people. Okay, well, now I'm not going to like you. Now, if you said I went to prison and learned and I was redeemed, then okay, if you made a mistake and that's how your story is wrapped, then that's different. So I think what we're talking about, and this is such fascinating, I've never been asked that before. I think what we're talking about is the role of you in this story and the value. Like if you tell a story about your grandfather and what he taught about hard work, then we're going to assume you value hard work. We're going to assume you love your grandfather. If you tell a story about your dogs, oh, he likes dogs, that sort of thing. Just because you're in a negative situation, that is separate. Now, there are certain ways that we have to be more sensitive when we're going to bring up stories that have painful things in them. We have to take a second look at how we give it to the audience. But that's more of a reason, in my opinion, or a result of the pain we're going to take them to. And if they've been through something similar, we need to be sensitive that stories can be so powerful. You can launch somebody right back into their own nightmare. And we have to be.
And that has happened to me, actually. I had a student who was really, really overweight, and it came to find out that she had done that as a protective mechanism of things that happened to her when she was younger. And I had a woman approach me in the audience later and said, listen, like, I don't know if we should even bring that up, because like that, like I felt that a little bit because I had something similar happen to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. I thought I was trying to help, shed the light on something here. And so I was completely oblivious to that. I had no idea.
Well, let me ask you something though. What were you making a comment, or were you telling a story about weight? First of all, clarify that.
So I brought up the story and said this woman had struggled with weight her entire life. And basically I had helped her because she never knew that this was she never knew it was a reason. And once I helped her recognize this is why she remembered at the moment where that was her way of protecting herself. She ended up being empowered to lose the weight and realize this was something she had created in her mind. And she now started losing all this weight, and she started moving in a positive direction. So for me, I was teaching a lesson about having a breakthrough in a moment where maybe something had happened to you a long time ago that you didn't even know. And then you don't have to be, encumbered by it your entire life. So I thought I was turning to something positive. Apparently not. I made a mistake here.
Well, don't be so quick to say that. And also what it sounds like is this is an example of a type of story every one of us should have, a customer testimonial story, a story where, those are the best stories in your business and in your keynotes, are the stories of the people you've helped or you've seen have a transformation because of this truth that you want to teach. So I would by no means say that because you helped a woman with her pain of losing weight, I would nowhere say that's off topic. Off limits. I would say, wait a minute. If people are getting their feelings hurt, then we need to look at how the story was crafted, because there is a way that you have to be sensitive to that. And there is a way that you can craft the story where people won't feel shamed if that is where they are. It's all in the crafting. But I say by no means would my advice be don't tell it at all. There are definitely ways to do it tastefully. And it's a real story that really happened. Right. And a lot of speakers are health and wellness speakers. So I'm sorry, weight and sickness and whatever is going to come into play when you talk. And I am plus size, and I'm telling you, no, you're not. That doesn't mean that nobody can tell me a story about somebody losing weight. Sorry, I just don't want to. We got to be careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater when we get advice.
Well, and this leads to kind of what I was thinking as well, is like, so in my mind, this woman had it followed what I and I want to hear more about from you on this, a structure of a story. Like something happens in their life that changes everything. There's a struggle, there's a conflict, and then there's the move towards a resolution. Can you talk about, I know you talked a lot about the formula of how a story is typically constructed.
Sure. And there's no hard and fast right or wrong. Everybody will have their own way to get there. And I've heard a lot of different ways of structuring a story. This is just something that helps me. You may add pieces, you may take them away. There are some I'm pretty more concrete about. But you're exactly right. The first thing before you even put it through this structure, this formula, is understanding what you want it to do. So the first question you should first ask yourself questions. Why am I telling this story? What's the point? What lesson am I trying to teach? What's the point that I need this person to learn? How did this story illustrate the point I want to make? A lot of times I'm seeing stories that don't really illustrate the point that you were trying to make. So let me ask you before I go through the formula, because we'll use this example you've given us. What is the lesson you want? And there may be more, but keep it pretty simple, even if it's just one thing that for today's sake. What this whole experience with this woman is supposed to, it taught you, her, and me what? What's a lesson from it?
That sometimes the outside perspective of someone who knows what you're going through in life can sometimes just help you have a breakthrough. because they're not in it. They're not in the jar. They're outside, and they can provide.
And when we're constructing stories, you didn't do it, but a lot of times when I'm asking people this, they go right to what I call the spin, the nice answer, the polished answer, the tweetable, and I make them get more guttural first and less clunky and more really clear, just advice. And so to put words in your mouth, see, even I'm having trouble rethinking what you just said. So I want to be able to unpack it cleaner than that. I know, tell me again, quicker, like I'm a kindergartner, or tell me again what the lesson is. Yeah, see, tell me in a simpler way what that lesson was.
So sometimes having somebody else look at your life from the outside can help you see blind spots that you haven't had.
Love it, love it, love it. And you can even make it more guttural and simple. And this isn't for the sake of the speech. This is just for getting the data we need to put the story together. That it's hard to see it when you're inside of it, and that people outside of you can often have more clarity. It's always easy to look inside at someone else and have clarity. We always hear that as speakers. We're like, oh, it's so much easier to give other people advice because we're not emotionally attached. Mm-hmm. And you could even, wherever you say it in your speech or your story, you could even bring that up to your audience. You could go, hey, we can all give people relationship advice. We can all give people diet advice. We can all give people business advice. Why is it so easy? And why are we always so smart? Because we have a clarity. We have an advantage. We're on the outside. We're not attached to it. We can see. And that's the value of a coach. That's the value of an expert, is that they can see with clarity what's too hard for you to see because you're inside it. But I get what you're saying. For the sake of this story, the lesson is that sometimes the answers are found outside yourself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So then when we're going to put the story together, this story then obviously will be about this woman who's going to learn that her solution was not when she tried to do it on her own, but that when she found help outside. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you'd be surprised at how many times stories don't really match up, even when you only go this far. Now that we know this is the intent, and now there'll be other things you'll add. You'll add other lessons, other things. But let's just stick to simplistic. That's the one. Now that you know that, you go put it through a structure. The structure I like is that every story has a character. The main character who learns something. It's usually you. Because a lot of our stories, that character didn't have a conflict, but we learned from watching them. This is not the case in your story. She is the main character because she's the one with a problem. So it's a character with a conflict. Now, her problem was, obviously, she wanted to lose weight. Okay, right?
Yep.
Now, might be one of them. Now, knowing what we're talking about with the weight issue, you might also want to focus on another conflict she had. Maybe it wasn't just that she wanted to lose weight. Maybe it was that she wanted to have more energy. Maybe it was that she wanted to be able to play with her grandchildren. Do you see? Were there other things she wanted? A conflict is just something you want that you can't get to.
Yeah. So she was just very, very, a very just sad person, just very depressed. She felt bad about herself. She was self-conscious. She actually wouldn't fly on a plane because she was embarrassed.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. I mean, not beautiful that she was going that way, but we're tapping into, and when you say the story, since you already brought it up earlier, you could bring it up that said that she came to me with some issues. She didn't like the way she looked. She didn't like the way she felt. She was struggling with depression. See, already now you're framing it in a different way, as opposed to saying, you wouldn't do it, but let's just pretend, as opposed to saying, I met this woman and she was like, I am fed up. I'm sick of being fat. And she was fat. Okay, they're going to hate you. They're going to hate you.
Don't say that.
Skinny people, fat people. You see, there's where, but if you come and you could say she had extra pounds she didn't want, you're not making any statement. Mm-hmm. You're not shaming me. You're not making me feel bad. So you set up this, she came to me for help. She had tried everything. I mean, so the conflict is that she doesn't like her weight. She doesn't like how she's feeling. She had tried everything. Since you want the answer to be looking out, it's got to match up to the lesson being that she needed to get help from somebody else. Then also add in that component of she tried everything and it didn't work. She just realized, I thought I was smart. I can't do this on my own. So there's her conflict, very well defined. Now, the next part of the structure, as you already know, is adding the emotion. You already said it, but this, I believe, is where we connect as human beings in a story. Because even if we can't recognize her plot, we don't connect to plot. I believe we connect empathically, heart to heart, based on the emotion. I believe that's where our brain is starting to look for our own narrative, because we may not have extra pounds. Maybe it's that we're addicted to alcohol or taking too many drugs, or, so her story's not going to mirror ours. But when you start saying she was frustrated, she was tired, she was trying all these things and they weren't working. Now I'm going, oh man, she's singing my song. I'm finding common ground and I'm in my story. So don't forget, if you take one piece of advice, people listening to me today, in a story, please don't just tell me what happened. That's not a story. Those are facts. Facts are not a story. Just telling me this happened, this happened, this happened, that's not a story. A story needs a character with a problem, and don't just tell me what happened. Tell me how it made them feel. And use real words, but don't use words like sad. Do you see what I'm saying? Some words have become so overused, they don't have an emotional meaning to us anymore. But don't go to words you wouldn't use either, because this is supposed to be a conversation. And the more real it feels, the more real it will feel. And the point is not to choose the best word that makes them go, oh, what a beautiful alliteration. No, the point is that now they're standing in this story. Your story is now doing its work. So let me finish the formula. A character plus a conflict plus emotion plus a resolution. Okay, that's something solves it. Maybe, and it could be several things. Obviously, it was you. Maybe it's a piece of advice, realizing she was looking in the wrong direction. I mean, she could learn several things, but to make it simple, because you want the story to just show that she needed to go outside herself for the answer, you could say, I showed, and I'm not going to put the words in your mouth, but in this part of the story, so we got together and I showed her that she didn't need to be afraid. She didn't need to be ashamed, that actually she was working harder than she needed to. And that I've spent 25 years studying this. And just like she wouldn't go try to learn how to fix her car, but would go to somebody who spent the time studying, whatever you would say to her, I'm getting tripped up and getting the words out. I told her, let me step in and show you what I've learned, because you're just one person. I've worked with hundreds. And so I've seen it, and I have the clarity to see what may not be clear to you. And it's easier than you think. And it's much more worth your time, because in a way this is why stories are so valuable and persuasive, because this is your opportunity in your story to sell me on you, but we don't think you're given a pitch. Well, we may see a little through it if it gets too thick. So that's the resolution of her story. Now we need another emotion. Okay. So how did it make her feel to realize this truth? And then we're going to give her a victory moment, maybe 10 pounds later, or she called you up, and you don't always have to make it about weight, but she called me up and said, guess what? I just ran my first marathon. Or that's the victory moment is when they're on the other side of it. And then there's an emotion attached to that. Now, why do we do all that? Why do we do that? Conflict emotion, resolution emotion, victory moment emotion. Because I believe through story, we're letting somebody test drive this truth. And if they're truly experiencing it, then the person on the other side is going to come into this story and they're going to recognize the pain and they're going to recognize the emotion. And now they're standing in their story, but now they get to test drive your car. So that's how powerful this is, because I get to feel what it was like. I haven't felt victory in my own life, but because I'm standing in her story, I'm experiencing it. And that's an amazing, beautiful thing when you take them all the way through. Now we are standing in the story of the person who's on the other side, and we feel it. And it's like getting our own victory. And then after that, you add the lesson. What did we learn from all this? Go tell them what that story just taught them. And maybe one or two things, we learned in that whole experience, recap it for us. And then maybe give some words of encouragement to the audience if you want. I know what you're thinking. It was easier for her. I know what you're thinking, but I work all the way. You can give, sorry, that's not encouragement. That's obstacles. So if they're, let me turn my phone off, sorry. If they are, you can almost say what they might be thinking. In any sales conversation, we hit that point where we know what their objectives might be. And you can even address it in the story. And this is the point where you're spinning it now to the audience, in case I didn't make that clear. You've told the story, but now we're turning it around and we're making that story about them. So that's where here's a lesson, how would it might apply to you, what would, and some sort of an action step, what they could go do with it. People say all the time, I can't tell stories about me. I'm talking too much about me. And I think you can talk about yourself if those are the good stories you want to use to teach. Now, I do recommend switching it up every now and then. I don't want all stories about your dog, but if I don't mind stories about you as long as they're about me. And so if every story, if you follow my structure and spin it to make it about the audience, then you're always having a reason that's about them to tell the story. Now, is it really necessary to have the objection and to have the encouragement? Maybe not. But I've also given you a structure that if somebody said, you have a 10-minute TED Talk, you have a 5-minute speech to give, I would say, go tell a good story, but make it follow this formula so that it works itself. So every story really, okay, this is going to throw some of y'all off, but I think every story, every brand, this is my Trojan horse philosophy, should be about 3 things. It's always about me to make it personal. And the salesperson, the trusted source of this information. It's about me because we buy you first. It's about the message told in story form, and it's about the customer. And in every story we need, and every brand, same thing goes with the brand. Sorry to take it right out of Keynote and into a brand, but this is a great place to talk about how when we go to your website and we're looking at this first page, this website first page that's sort of like the album cover, if you will, for an artist. I believe those 3 narratives must also come into play. There's the about me, because we're buying the speaker. Unless you're running a training company where your face isn't part of it, most of us are a big part of the message. We're selling the entertainer, the artist. So there's the whole, who is Jason and what is his style? And it's going to be funny and there's going to be songs, or maybe this one's going to be, high interactivity or whatever. There's the whole about me because we sell us. Then there's about our message, that unique spin you have on the same content everybody else is throwing around. There's nothing really unusual, but here's Jason's spin on it. It's about however you've chosen to wrap your content in a sexy, unique way. And then the third story is always the client. You can have great sexy about you language, great sexy messaging, but at the end of the day, the client or the buyer is waking up not necessarily asking to reach a high new level of peace and productivity. They might be asking for more sales, stronger teams, better leaders, not getting more energy, not feeling so tired. You can't forget the words they're using. So all 3 is a nice marriage, if you will, that all 3 come into play. And whenever I see speaker stories in the hot seats about their brand or in their speeches, if there's something missing, it's often because it's heavy weighted in one direction. It's too much about them, never becomes about the customer and what they need. Or it's all data, it's all message, and there's nothing personal in it. So we never got to know you. Does that make sense?
So yeah, so these 3 stories really are necessary for a well-rounded approach to make sure that you're addressing. So the story about you is I guess, and you're the product, I guess, really in a lot of cases.
And you can use the word perspective. If that makes you feel better, if somebody goes, wait, I don't know what she's talking about. I'm searching for the right word. Maybe it's 3 perspectives. Okay, yes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Your perspective, the message perspective, and the buyer's perspective. That works enough. But it's easier when you see it in application because I can point it out every time. It's harder to describe it like this.
And so each of these stories follows the same format?
Okay, I knew I'd get confusing. No, they're not three separate stories you're putting together in one. They're three
completely separate, right?
No, there are three components of, okay, the story you're putting together about this woman is about you. You're in it. It's personal to you. You met with her. This is your story. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not a chicken soup for the soul story. It's not something you got in a book. And if you did, I'd go, I need it to be personal to you. I need it to be yours. I need it. So you are in this.
Okay.
And maybe even more so could be, and that's when I learned, and that's why I love the work that I do, is because I get to watch that transformation. And that's why I'm here to help you. So you are part of this story. If you had just told it, for instance, about a woman working with another coach, I would have said, it's too distanced from you. I need to make this personal to you.
Okay.
So you're in the story. The message is obviously in there. It's just because that's the given. We all know what the message we want to give is, though some people don't. Some people aren't really sure what that story was supposed to be about and have to get clarity on that. And when you start speaking my language, you're getting my story in there too. So wherever, in this case, quite simply, it was at the end of the story. So how does this apply to you? So where are you standing in your own life? So, however when you make it about the audience, I made you do all three of those things in one story. That's what I'm talking about. I just don't know what to call it. Narrative, perspective, dimensions, angles.
Right. But so you're hitting all three of these angles in one story by being deliberate in the crafting of it, so that because I guess it has, all three are required really for it to be a powerful story that's going to resonate with somebody. That makes total sense. And so I have a question about emotion. Seems to be such an important part of the storytelling process. Is that emotion coming straight from the conflict, or is this coming from an identity with the struggles of that person? How can a speaker or storyteller really learn how to identify the emotional components that will really stick with people?
Okay. Story is a tool to make your audience feel a certain way. And so you're trying to, as a speaker, relate to your audience, show them you get. You're trying to get them to recognize their own pains that you want to pull out. So really, it's not about finding the best emotions. It's about finding emotions that mirror each other. When I'm going to look for a story, if I'm going to go speak to single moms, then I'm going to want a story where that character has an emotion that matches who my ideal buyer is. That's where you've got to really go deep into who are you trying to reach, because this isn't about a one size fits all. It's what motivates, and we don't always have that option. Sometimes you got everybody in the room. And in that case, I will just go, okay, in my head, this story is speaking to those people who feel invisible, who feel forgotten, who feel like they don't matter. Some of those universal emotions are these people who need to feel valued, these people who feel like they can't do it. You cherry pick. Now, you cherry pick the emotions to mirror that of your audience. That's why these stories are strategic, so that they can recognize themselves in the story. And sometimes it can be that same story you tell every time. Your story is a great example. You may be speaking to old people, or senior citizens, sorry. And you're going to, now their emotions are different. Their pain is that they can't move around. You could find similarities in your character that matches, that she felt, that mirrors their emotions, and then choose different emotions. If it's a group of businessmen, well, she was worried she didn't have the time. She didn't, she was busy. You could kind of choose the frustrations and emotions that mirror your audience, because again, it's about relating to them. Yeah.
And okay, that makes a ton of sense. And so what I'm hearing is like the emotions, especially in regards to the conflicts, are the emotions that are going to allow you to connect with them, because these are probably the same things that they're struggling with right now. And so maybe you could say something like, you may not, would you say something like, maybe, maybe you're not, maybe you haven't struggled with your weight, but have you ever felt that A, B, C, D?
You could do that. There are some people who do that because they want the audience to nod, and then they get us an NLP technique or whatever. But let me tell you, just by telling the story, you don't have to go, you ever felt that way? Because they are. Now, some speakers, they're already in the story. They're already, and if they haven't, it doesn't matter. However, if you think your story is going on too long, or if you're worried, or it's a really big, long story that stretches out over the whole speech, then it does make sense to have stopping points, to have times where you'll pause and go, now let's think about this. Have you ever found yourself in that situation? Times when you can pull them in even more. And that would be more of a reason. If the story's only 5 minutes, or 10 minutes, there's not as much of a need to go, have you felt that way? But the emotion is important at each stage. We've seen those campy, I'll help you make 6 figures in 2 months types of things. Right. And look at Fred standing beside his Porsche, in front of his, they do stuff like that because they know we're going to feel, look at how ads run, and people who are really manipulating emotions do this. They do the same thing. When you show that, look what we did for this client, and 6 months later, he's making $1 million and he's got his own private jet. They're doing that on purpose. And look how he feels. They know that you're still in that story, and that you're still experiencing that. And you're putting up your test, you're pushing them in your Corvette and letting them test drive it. And it sells more. Anyway, I'm not explaining it very well. I might have made it more confusing, but that's why it matters to keep going all the way to the other side. Okay. Well, that's what a client testimonial is. You're showing how excited, the transformation that people had in working with you, and how they felt on the front end and how they felt on the back end. I mean, it's critical if you're going to share the story, your success story about helping somebody lose weight, my gosh, certainly you're not going to leave out the point where she lost 50 pounds. That's the best part of the story. And look how she feels. All right. I'm beating that up. Sorry.
So this strikes me also. So the emotions that they're relating to in the struggle and the conflict is what connects you with them. But also when you talk about the emotions involved in the victory and the resolution, these are the ones that are missing, or that they are longing for, or that they're looking forward to experiencing. And through the story, you now give them the vehicle to experience those.
Correct. And other people use different words. Somebody says there's a before and an after. Your person in your story has a before and after. Somebody else says it's a transformation. Show us the transformation all the way back. Often, all the way to the other side. So however you need to word this in order to help you best get it. It's not a hard and fast right or wrong. It doesn't really matter that you latch on to the words I've chosen. I don't want you to go away from this going, but wait, Kelly said there's supposed to be a victory moment, and there's not. There'll be plenty of times when this gets muddy and gray. The point is that you pay attention to the structure. The point is that you think about and plan the story beforehand. The point is that you find something that works for you, and it will make crafting and telling stories much easier, instead of just putting something down on paper and not being really sure why it didn't work. My formula may not always be the hard and fast way. But in every case, if I make somebody put their story through the formula, the story gets better. And even there have been times with my Chub Rub story, for instance, that it was just a funny story of me in the sequin pants and da-da-da-da. And I realized I didn't follow my formula. And it was already pretty darn good. But I went, well, what'll happen if I really go in here and really flesh out what the problem was and the conflict, and the story became much richer and better. And it becomes more than just a good story. It becomes a story that takes your audience on an actual progression. you're making an argument, so to speak.
Is the lack of a proper story structure one of the biggest mistakes you see in people trying to tell a story, or is it something else?
No, that's definitely, that's a main one. If I had to look at common mistakes or whatever, yes, lack of structure, not really understanding what you're just telling the story, thinking they want to hear your story, and nobody cares. They don't care until really, and it's you have to make them care, and that's okay. So the structure is the first issue. The delivery, there's two parts of a good speech or a story. It's the script and the delivery. Whether you fully script it or not, there's the words that you choose, how you put them together, how you that matters. Then there's so structure's a big issue there. Then there's the delivery. The biggest mistake is people aren't becoming conversational. They're many times they're making it bigger than it's supposed to be. They're using words they wouldn't use. They're doing pratfalls and things that you wouldn't do in a normal conversation. And and I'm constantly trying to get people back to who they are in real life. Now, sure, we exaggerate. I take my personality traits and pump them up or exaggerate. Or if I'm goofy, I'm going to be even goofier. But it's too many people are trying too hard. And the best speakers, you really feel like they're just having a conversation with you, even if they've scripted the words. So in the delivery, and a tip, let me give you a tip. Write the way you talk. Practice it while you write it. And then talk the way you talk when you give it. So when I'm writing a story now, and this is a reversal from how I used to do it. I used to sit down in front of a piece of paper and just blurt it out and hope my creative muse got it and hope that it turned out good. And if I didn't, I threw it away, or I tried to work on it afterwards. I've totally changed my process now. So I didn't even follow a formula before. And that's why my stories were just entertaining stories, and they didn't sell more. But my business started doing very well. Not when I was telling better stories, but when I was choosing more strategic stories to tell that would teach, that would inspire, that would motivate, that would seed for books I have, that would seed for my coaching, that would really illustrate and convince them. So, okay, so my process changed. And now when I write a story, you can't read it when it's done. It won't make any sense. And even when I'm working on my speeches, I'm not writing it out every word for word and then trying to memorize a wall of words. But as I'm writing it, or writing the lines of that story, I'm practicing saying them. When I say it that way, sure, the lines get better, just like in music or in a song. I'll come up with I remember the furniture in the nursing home. It was 50 shades of mauve, shrink wrapped under disgruntled plastic. Okay, that was a line that, yes, that's carefully crafted. So some of the lines are carefully crafted and then others just aren't as great, but I'm constantly saying it and practicing it as I write, so that by the time I'm finished, they're just really almost like bullet point phrases that I could have in front of me, or eventually don't even need to, because I kind of remember those phrases I don't want to forget. But then I practice saying it like it's a conversation, like I'm thinking of the word on the spot, like I'm looking at somebody. I am a heavily scripted speaker who then has the courage to come off script, because I know where I'm going. I know where I've been. I've practiced, I've rehearsed, but now I fly. So I'm able to stop a story and talk about somebody's sweater, or oh, I know, right? I'm able to really bring them in the moment because I'm fully present in the story. And that's another thing that I will say a lot of speakers tend to do, is they step outside their story and tell us about it. They'll give us the information and they're distanced from it. And the way I look at it, when you're distanced from it, so am I. So if you're telling it from that safe distance, then I'm not connecting and engaging as much as I could. So I have people go back in it, and I don't turn them into actors, and we don't put our hands a certain way, but we feel it again. We put those virtual reality glasses. I'll often say, I can't see it, Give me something to see here. What, not a wrong or right answer, but what does she look like? What color was it? You know, these details that you're putting on these glasses and letting us see the story. And that's why it's more emotional. And some people are like, oh my gosh, I've never cried when I've told this before. I'm like, because now you're in it. So be aware that it's going to make you a little bit more emotional because I'm forcing you to stand inside it and feel it again. When people ask me, how is it? They say, Kelly, I've heard you tell that story 5 times. And every time it feels different. It feels real. It feels just as magical as the first time. And I don't really know the exact answer, but I know part of it is that every single time I'm standing inside it again and I'm watching it and I'm feeling it and I'm experiencing it, and I've brought you in it too. So every single time you're experiencing that story with me, as opposed to me standing outside it. And those elements constantly pull people in. That's where, when you said at the beginning, I don't know what it is you do, I really do believe that some of it might be DNA, but others of it is strategically pulling you into the story. Another thing speakers need to do is show, don't tell. And I already referenced it. Show me, don't tell me. Show me. If I can't see the scene, I can't connect. And it's not about choosing the right details, and don't choose too many. And you get to choose when and where you do it. But you're taking me in this room, and if I have no frame of reference, then they're just flat details. Again, it comes back to processing the different parts of the brain. And I'll shut up after this. When clients, I used to laugh when they'd say, we want somebody to be more interactive. And I'd used to laugh and I go, but my people in my audience, they don't tweet. They don't move. They barely breathe. When I'm telling stories, sometimes when I'm in the other blah, 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 they get distracted, but they don't move. Don't tell me they're not engaged. Now I finally have the answer because science proves it. It's very interactive. It's just all going on up here.
You know, you said something that really struck me as well, and I've seen some of your videos. And one thing I've noticed, and I never knew if this was intentional or unintentional, and I'm wondering now, especially because you said how you go back into the story. As I've watched you tell stories, I see your eyes darting side to side, and it looks like you're there. You're experiencing it. You're kind of, you know, you're in the nursing home and you're kind of looking around, and I just see there's a connection where it looks like, whether this is rehearsed or not, it looks like you're in the moment and you're thinking through and processing in real time along with me, the viewer.
Yes. And you know what's so fascinating is when I was a storyteller, that's all I did. It was like when you go in acting and you watch somebody on a stage do a skit. You know, you could be anybody. They're not talking to you. They're talking to each other. They're doing a skit. And so there's that fourth wall. You're just looking in on the window. And so, yes, when you were watching me, you were seeing me look and da-da-da. But what I've trained myself to do, which I mentioned earlier, I'll mention it again, is not just look around and experience it and feel it. If that's all I did, then I've just done a skit. Do you see? I work really hard to constantly be looking at you, wondering if you can see it too. I work really hard to oh, can you hear her singing? Oh, and then because I'm telling you this story. We're having a conversation like I'm sitting in your kitchen. And I would never in your kitchen go off to the side and tell the story to the wall. I'm telling it to you. And so there are things we have to do, even if you can't see your audience and it's dark. There are things I had to train myself. How do I do this? How do I look at them? How do I act like I'm talking to this guy right there? And that made the difference in a huge way. That's when I began really having an impact, I think, on my audiences, was the ability to also look at you and bring you into it, not even in a subtle way without going, so, hey, how do you feel about that? But, right? I mean, I will look at people. I know, right? I know. It's weird, isn't it? I know. I didn't believe it either. I know what you're thinking. By the way, random note, I told this at some chapter somewhere, some event, and they loved it. They said, what was the biggest takeaway for some? A lot of my comments in my speech and my stories will follow that. I know what you're thinking. Now, whether it's in the beginning when I'm like, I know what you're thinking, motivational speaker, I thought she'd be skinnier. I know what you're thinking. That is a technique I use, whether I even say the words out loud or not, to constantly be guessing what my audience is probably thinking, because they're not talking to me. I mean, if we're lucky, they're not talking back. Only in a comedy club will they talk back. They're not. But if this has to be a conversation, then I have to imagine that they are. So there's a constant, and that's a great way to add humor. All you want to add funny lines is just, if the story's kind of boring, then add your own track in there. I know. I was thinking, get me out of here. This is like prison. Somebody come shiv me. You could have these little sarcastic comments. But I know what you're thinking. I'm doing that with a speech coming up. I'm starting it off with, I know what you're thinking. I'm going to make 2 jokes, and then I'm going to go, and I know the rest of you are thinking, what in the world does storytelling have to do with IT? Because I know it's what they will be thinking. So it's a great way to speak their language, their perspective.
That is a huge tip. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna use that.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to honor your time. Just one thing is someone crafting a story, and how does somebody know if they're on the right track? How do they know if this is do they just give this to their friends? Are they like, how does somebody know if a story has potential? Is that just a learned skill, or is you just got to have like an audience listen to them, or give it to their spouse, or how would you recommend?
So I get a lot of people that say, does this story hold weight? Do you think this is a good enough one? It's a hard question to answer, because the first thing I want to know is, well, where are you going to use it? Is it going to be an opening, a closing? Is it going to be somewhere tucked in the middle? There's too many moving pieces. I can tell you if it's exciting. Like if it's really exciting, I'm like, whoa, that's a big story. Make sure you do it justice. It has a lot of weight. But there's a lot of little teeny stories. I call them big T-shirts on a clothesline, or little socks. And a lot of them are just little socks that serve little purposes here and there. But the first thing you need to think about is, what do I want to use it for, and which story fits? I've got a bunch of speeches coming up for the same client, and I'm so bummed because my opening story is not that sexy. It's not going to make them laugh. It's not going to make them cry, but it is the perfect story for them because it really illustrates what they're going through, and the client loves it. He's like, perfect story. IT people will totally relate to scientists. It's a perfect story to tell, but it's not going to be, it's not going to be super exciting. But you asked me how to know if it has traction. Well, number one, put the work into it. Number one, at least when you're going to give it to somebody, then make sure you've made half an effort to structure it and go through the things I've said. And then you can test it out on your family. They're not always a good option. Test it out on your speaker friends. Some family is, but you can test it out on your friends. You can join a Toastmasters. It's a great place to go test out your stories and get feedback. I think more chapters should do more of that. These story swaps where you actually can get feedback from the room on how to do a story. And sometimes, if you make your stories 5 minutes or less, if it's not that great, it doesn't really matter. I don't want you all to be second guessing every story you tell. Now, if your speech is full of a bunch of boring little stories, then I'm going to be like, it might be nice to have a couple of big ones in there, or, something real dramatic or something real funny, but don't second guess it. And then once it's on its feet, it gets better every time you tell it. The first time it may be like, that was a little clunky, and your audience will start to tell you, oh, I thought you were going to say such and such, and oh, I just love that story. They'll start to feed you lines and better ones. And then, it's hard. I still to this day, Jason, do not know what story somebody's going to like. I still struggle with, I wonder if they want to hear that one, or they want to hear that one. What if they think this one is too sappy? What if this one is too much? We could beat it to death.
That makes sense. Okay. Got it. Well, listen, we are out of time. I want to really, I don't know if you noticed here, I have like a page of single space notes here I've been taking while we've been here. I know all of our viewers and listeners do as well. And how does somebody, like, they want to do what you do, they want to learn from you, they want to pick your brain, they want to know more. How does somebody find you, reach out to you, those kinds of things?
Okay. Well, first, immerse yourself in the world of storytelling. You don't need to just come to me.
Okay.
Just get yourself in that world. Start watching, learning, pay attention, practicing. I've written a lot of free articles on LinkedIn, a lot of articles. And I have a free gift. Let me give you that. kellysfreegift.com, no apostrophe. So it's KELLYS, freegift.com. There's more stories. There's more motivation, and there's some more knowledge. And I think at this point, call me on it if I'm wrong, and I'll put it in there. But I think there's a downloadable PDF copy of my book, The Story Formula, in there, the workbook, that you can download and print out. So I have a lot of resources available for you for free. And if it's anything above that, just go to my site, motivationalspeaker.kellyswanson.com. It's very clear what I offer and how I do it. And I wish you all the best. I think the main thing is just put in the work and keep an awareness of how important stories are, and how no matter how small you think your story is, it's probably bigger than you think and totally capable of doing what it needs to do, and that your story matters to the one who needs to hear it.
That is incredible. Thank you so much, Kelly, on behalf of the NSA Carolinas. It has been an incredible pleasure, and I know everyone will get a ton of value from this, so thank you. And maybe I look forward to hopefully seeing you at the chapter again soon, too.
Nice. Thank
Take
you.
care.
You too.